All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be taking a look at something pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all happened back in January of 2010, Appomattox, Virginia.
Oh,
So
okay.
we've got news reports and the Wikipedia entry on this one to go off of. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
not.
it's a tough one.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sounds like it's gonna be heavy.
Yeah, and the goal is to kind of go beyond just the bare facts
Yeah.
and try to piece together, a timeline.
Yeah.
And then, maybe talk about, the human impact of this whole thing.
Right. And maybe some of the unsettling things that came out of it too.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Some of the deeper questions that this case raises. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's start at the beginning here. January 19th, 2010.
Okay.
So, according to the sources, uh, the first indication that something was wrong was a call to the police
Right.
about a man on a road near Appomattox.
Okay.
Just seemed to need medical attention.
Right.
So at first it sounds pretty routine.
Right. Yeah, it just sounds like a welfare check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
welfare check.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is that it's so ambiguous at first, right?
Yeah, totally. Like the person who called it in didn't even say a crime was happening,
Exactly.
just that somebody needed help. So yeah. It's kind of a strange start to what happens next.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is because, almost immediately after the police arrive, the situation turns violent.
Oh, wow.
This man who needed help, who was later identified as Christopher Brian Spate,
Okay.
opens fire on the officers.
Oh, jeez.
And it doesn't even stop there.
Nah.
It gets crazier. So
Right.
then he targets a police helicopter,
Whoa.
shoots at the helicopter.
So this is like an all-out assault, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the sources confirm he shot at the helicopter, forced it into an emergency landing.
Yeah.
And I mean, just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
A call about somebody needing help, needing medical attention, turns into a full-blown attack on law enforcement.
Right. Yeah. And not even just ground law enforcement, like he's going after the air support too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a huge escalation really fast.
Yeah. And as that helicopter's going down, Spate flees into the woods nearby.
Okay.
And that triggers just a massive law enforcement response. I mean,
Uh,
over 100 officers end up, converging on the area to hunt this guy down.
Right. Yeah. So it goes from like, a local thing to a huge manhunt in like no time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And, it shows just how quickly things can get out of control,
Mhm.
especially when, firearms are involved.
Yeah, for sure. Like at this point, I imagine the police are less worried about helping the guy and way more about just catching him before he hurts anyone else.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh.
So
Oh.
while they're setting up a perimeter, starting to search for Spate, they make a really grim discovery.
Okay.
Inside a house that was actually co-owned by Spate and his sister,
Right.
they find 3 people dead.
Oh, no.
So his sister,
Yeah.
Lily Sipe, who was 38,
Oh.
her husband, Dwayne Sipe, who was also 38,
Mm-hmm.
and their 4-year-old son, Joshua.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
That's awful.
And the reports, they say that, little Joshua was found at the top of the staircase.
Mm.
He had been shot multiple times, 4 times, the reports indicate.
God.
Yeah. It's,
That's just a horrible image to think
yeah,
about.
yeah, you just can't imagine something like that.
Yeah.
Sadly, it doesn't stop there, though.
Oh.
Investigators continue their work, and they find 4 more victims dead outside of the house,
Wow.
and then a final victim on the road.
Oh, my God.
What's really unsettling about this whole thing is all of them were reportedly acquainted with Spate.
Yeah, that's something you see a lot with these kinds of things, right? Like these tangled relationships.
Yeah.
And it makes the whole thing so much harder to wrap your head around.
Right. Like, what could lead to this much violence between people who knew each other?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the victims found outside.
Okay.
Really, really sad details here.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Morgan L. Dobbins, just 15 years old,
Oh, God.
Laura Lee Sipe's daughter,
Mm-hmm.
found on the porch, shot twice.
Terrible.
And right there with her, Emily A. Quarles,
Hmm.
also 15, a friend of Morgan's,
Okay.
found in a vehicle in the driveway,
Mm-hmm.
had been shot once.
It's just awful to think about those kids, you know?
It is, yeah. And then there's Emily's father, Jonathan L. Quarles, who was 43.
Okay.
He was found in the road or driveway and had been shot 4 times.
Wow.
And then his wife, Karen Quarles, also
Hmm.
43,
Mm-hmm.
Emily's mother, found on the porch, shot 3 times.
God.
You can just see this ripple
It's
effect.
just awful. Like a whole family wiped out.
Yeah. And then finally, Ronald the Scruggs,
Yay.
who was 16, Emily Quarles' boyfriend. He was found in the driveway, shot once in the back.
Oh, man.
Just imagine, it's just,
Yeah, just one moment of violence and it's over.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to grasp just the sheer amount of violence that happened in such a short period of time.
Right.
And
It's just a lot to process.
yeah, it is. The focus then shifts, to the suspect. Christopher Brian Speight. He was 40 years old at the time.
Okay.
The manhunt continues through the night, and he eventually surrenders the next day, January 20th,
Right.
near that wooded area that they had been, zeroing in on.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is the reports say he was wearing a bulletproof vest.
Oh, wow.
So that might suggest some level of planning, like he was anticipating some kind of confrontation.
Yeah. But I wonder, if he was expecting to fight, why'd he give up?
Yeah. And another weird thing is he wasn't carrying the rifle they think he used.
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, where was that weapon? Why wasn't he armed when he gave himself up?
Yeah, you gotta wonder what was going through his head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, as all this is going on, the whole community's understandably on edge.
Right. Yeah, I bet.
Schools and businesses are shut down. Residents are told to stay inside,
Totally.
for their own safety.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation gets even more tense when the police start worrying that Speight's house might be rigged with explosives.
Oh, wow. So now they're dealing with, a potential bomb threat on top of everything else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They call in the bomb squad to search the house on the morning of January 20th. And sure enough, they find explosives
Oh, jeez.
inside and around the building.
Mm.
But thankfully, they're able to detonate those safely.
Okay, good. Good.
But, you can only imagine the level of fear in that community at this point.
For sure. It's just one thing after another.
Yeah.
Totally.
And there's actually a really concerning detail that comes out later.
Okay.
Apparently, the house had actually been left unsecured.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
For over 12 hours.
After they found those bodies.
After the bodies were found.
Oh, my God.
It seems like there was some kind of miscommunication,
Yeah.
between state and local police
Yeah.
about who was supposed to secure the place.
That's a big oversight.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in such a sensitive situation,
Yeah.
that kind of lapse in communication.
Yeah. Especially when you think about, evidence and stuff like that.
Right.
That can get messed up if the scene's not secure.
Right. So it shows just how, chaotic.
Yeah.
It just kind of high stress the whole situation was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now let's talk about Christopher Speight himself.
Okay.
We know he was working as a security guard at a grocery store
All right.
when all this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the details that came out later really shed some disturbing light on the timeline of the murders,
Oh, okay. What do you mean?
and maybe even his motivations.
Yeah.
So about 2 years after the shootings, investigators revealed that the three psychs found inside the house,
Mm-hmm.
Lauralee, Dwayne, and little Joshua,
Right.
they were likely killed 2 days
2 days.
before any of the others.
The other 5.
Whoa.
That's huge. So, there's a 2-day gap
Right.
between the first murders and the rest of them.
It really makes you wonder, what happened during those 2 days.
Right. It's super creepy to think about.
It is, yeah.
What was he doing?
Right. And then you have the statements that Speight made to investigators.
Okay.
And this is where things get really bizarre and disturbing.
All right.
So according to investigators, Speight claimed that he was commanded by an Egyptian goddess named Jennifer.
An Egyptian goddess named Jennifer.
Yeah. To murder his family because he believed they were possessed by demons.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So, he's not even claiming he did it on his own. It's
Yeah.
he's saying he was following orders from this, made-up goddess.
Yeah, and he said the other victims were killed, so they couldn't help his first victims because this Jennifer demanded that their bodies decompose.
Okay, that's really disturbing.
It is, and it suggests a complete break from reality. Right.
Yeah, for sure. He's obviously dealing with some serious mental health issues.
Yeah. And it raises so many questions
Yeah.
about how these kinds of delusions can lead to such violence.
Right. How does someone get to that point?
Yeah,
And how do you even begin to address something like that in the legal system?
right. And that leads us to the legal proceedings.
Okay.
So in June 2010,
Right.
just a few months after the shootings,
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Speight was declared incompetent to stand trial.
So he's basically saying he wasn't mentally fit to go to court.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning he wasn't capable of understanding the charges against him or assisting in his own defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's sent to a state psychiatric hospital for treatment,
Okay.
which kind of shows that the court recognized that his mental state was a major factor.
Yeah, totally. Like they're saying he needs help before they can even try him.
Exactly, yeah. But the legal process does eventually continue. In February 2013, Spate's sentenced as part of a plea agreement. He receives 5 life sentences plus an additional 18 years
Wow.
on multiple charges, including capital murder,
Okay.
which generally refers to murder that's committed under really specific aggravating circumstances,
Right.
and attempted capital murder for shooting at that helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Commonwealth's attorney at the time, Darrell Puckett, explained that mental health experts
Yeah.
for both the prosecution and the defense
Mm-hmm.
agreed that Spite was legally insane at the time of the killings.
Okay.
And because of that, Puckett said a death sentence would have been highly unlikely if the case had gone to trial.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if everyone agrees he wasn't in his right mind, it's hard to argue for the death penalty.
Right, yeah. So the plea deal essentially acknowledged those findings
Right.
while still ensuring that he, stay behind bars.
Yeah, for good reason.
So to kind of summarize this whole awful
Yeah.
event,
Yeah.
it started with a report of a man who needed help in Appomattox,
Right.
and it quickly escalated into this horrific act of violence that resulted in the deaths of 8 people.
Right. Including a 4-year-old.
Yeah, including a small child. The suspect, Christopher Spite, engaged law enforcement, fled into the woods, eventually surrendered.
Right.
They find explosives at his home,
Right.
just adding another layer of danger to an already crazy situation. And then later, those disturbing details
Yeah.
about the potential earlier timeline for some of the murders.
Right.
Spate's, his strange explanations
Yeah.
for his actions come to light. And, it all leads to a plea deal and multiple life sentences.
It's a lot to take in, like the timeline, the number of victims, the reasons he gave. It all adds up to just an awful tragedy.
Yeah, it really does. And, it leaves us with a final thought.
Okay.
Kind of an uncomfortable one, maybe. But how do we deal with these cases where mental health plays such a big role
Right.
in a violent crime?
Yeah. Like, how do we balance justice for the victims and their families with the understanding that the person who did it might not have been in control of their actions?
Exactly. And, what does this whole thing tell us about, the fragility of our communities
Yeah.
and the unseen struggles that people around us might be going through?
Right. It's like you never really know what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, it is.
And
Yeah,
this case really highlights that, like in a really tragic way.
it does. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And, we hope that this deep dive has shed some light on this, really dark, tragic chapter.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's
Right.
important to talk about these things, even if they're hard to hear.
Absolutely.
It makes you appreciate, the people in your life and the importance of mental health awareness and support.
Right, exactly.